Now this last point here, I really don't think there's a whole lot you can do about it. Whether you like it or not, you could be making a huge mistake. Okay, it's not totally super serious, but there are some things that you should know when it comes to living room colors. And specifically, if you have a smaller living room or even a family room, these are 7 errors that people are making when it comes to their living room colors. Because of course, we all want a bigger living room, right? I think most of us do. And even though we can't really physically expand the space and push out the walls, we can use color to our advantage. So homesandgardens.com have an article talking just about this, although I find with their lists, they always have double negatives that confuse the crap out of me. Can I say crap? So what I'll do is I'll just make them a little bit easier to process and just reword them the way that I would say them, and also give you some insight on each one, whether it's really a big deal or not to think about. So the first point they make is dabble with dark. You don't need to go with these light pale colors that in theory would be a good idea because they're nice and airy, they reflect a bunch of light, it makes it all nice and pretty. The fact of the matter is your living room is not going to be the main part of your home. It's a secondary space. It's a sectioned off room, which means you can experiment a little bit more with those darker, daring colors. And dark colors also have the added benefit of making a room feel, surprisingly to a lot of people, bigger. The walls are going to look like they're receding because you don't have those defined edges. The corners sort of meld into themselves and you don't really know how far it goes. So don't immediately think, oh, I gotta go light if it's a small room. Make your living room a little more fun with a dark color. I don't really know why they say that a lot of people think that you have to go with cool colors. I don't know if a lot of people think that way. I know I don't, especially with the trend towards warmer colors. For me, the takeaway here is dark colors. Dare to go dark. And it really isn't that much of a problem if you have windows too, because all of that light is going to enhance whatever dark color you go with. So you really have very little to worry about. But don't take my word for it. Test your colors out regardless, okay? Number 2 is harmonize your home. So even though this is your living room and it is sort of sectioned off, you don't want to veer completely off of what else is going on in the space. You still want some continuity and some flow from your hallways to your living room. You don't want to have it just completely separate. You can maybe go with a different color, of course, but there has to at least be a stylistic flow because the more it coordinates with everything else, the less you're going to have it stand out, and then people are going to notice how small it actually is. So you can pick a different, darker color, but don't stray too far away from whatever else you got going on. Number 3 is white ceilings, not totally a necessity. Even though I often recommend people to default to a white ceiling, that doesn't mean you always got to make it white. I just find the practical element of a bright ceiling is huge because it's going to reflect more light back into the space. Because especially if you have a chandelier or any overhead lighting, that light's going to reflect off of the surface of your ceiling, which then turns it into a giant light source. So that's one of the main reasons that lighter is usually better. But from a design perspective, there's a lot you can do with your ceiling. You can go with an accent color. You can continue the wall color onto the ceiling like they do in this example here, which some people call a cheap landlord look. Take it or leave it. But I think when you pull it off with a really vibrant color, like this sort of terracotta red here, what it can do is it shows that, hey, no, I made this choice. I'm not a cheap landlord, actually. I just went for a more streamlined, cohesive look that basically takes your eye away from all the different colors that are happening because there's only one color that's continuing throughout. And then you can start to look at other aspects of the space, like maybe focal points on the walls or out the window. You can see the nature. There's really a lot you can do here. In fact, if you have any of those angled ceilings, I almost always recommend you continue that wall color on top because then it's going to draw your eye upwards and it's going to have this sort of heightening effect, which I think is huge. The same to a lesser extent can be said about your straight up 90-degree kind of situations where it's just a flat ceiling. It can do the same thing because it's not a hard cutoff like a white ceiling. Good point. Now this next one doesn't have a ton to do with small living rooms. This one isn't going to make your living room feel bigger necessarily, but it will make it feel nicer, which I think is good. It's color psychology, using vibes and feelings to pick the right color. And I laughed when I said that, but this is one of the most important things that I consider when I'm picking colors for someone, mainly because color can have a huge impact on how we feel, our psychology. It can vary from person to person, but traditionally, especially in Western culture, your cooler colors are a little more serene and tranquil and calming. Your warmer colors can be a little more energetic, warming, cozy, creativity inducing. There's a lot there. Just have a think about how you want to feel in your living room. For me, I kind of want to chill out and just flop out at the end of a day in my living room or my family room. I might opt for a color that's a little bit more cool leaning or passive overall. I'm not going to look for something really vibrant, really zesty and zingy. Not in that space. The next one is use case. So we talked about vibes, but what about practicality? What is a living room used for a lot of people? Or a family room? This is kind of using both in this regard. It's probably a place where your family are going to be living, hanging out, and essentially it's a space for everyone. It's more communal, so you have to factor in all the people that are going to be using it. On the flip side, if you're the only person that uses the kitchen, if you do all the cooking, maybe you have a little more say about what color the cabinets are going to be, or more specifically your bedroom. That's a totally personal space. But a living room and a family room, these are areas that should represent everyone. So it should feel pretty cozy. You got to have some nice big comfy couches to sort of fill the space. You don't want to go with small furniture in a small living room because everything's just going to feel shrunken. Fill the space with some cozy elements, big poofs and those beautiful poofy footstools and throw pillows and blankets and a nice couch, and then have some fun elements maybe for the kids. If they want to see some color, have a little accent piece like some wall art or whatever, and just have fun with it. So everyone has something to appreciate about the space. I think that's a very fun point. Don't forget about those kiddos. What about color theory? Complementary pairings. This is another one that's a really fun tool to use if you're not familiar with it. It's using the color wheel and the different aspects of pairing your colors in really interesting ways using science, using color theory. We've talked about color theory in a few videos. I'll leave one in the cards up top if you want to check it out. But essentially, complementary colors are two colors that are on opposite ends of the color wheel. And these are going to be your most dynamic, polarizing, but fun pairings to put together. So you can use that in a space like this. Right now you have this sort of turquoise color and that pink. And you can tell there's something going on there. It's really exciting. And I bet you that this designer had knowledge of the color wheel because maybe the owner really loved that pink couch and you wanted it to pop as much as possible. The best way to do that is find their complementary pairing, which is sort of that turquoise color that ends up on the wall. And the reason that I think it works so well in this situation is you have one being the dominant color and then the other being a little more supportive. You have way more of that turquoise because it's on all the walls and even on the cabinet doors down there under the TV, looks like. And then the couch is the supportive accent. Yes, you have a little bit of pink in the chairs and all that, but really it's all about the turquoise and then you got the pink to support it. That's one of the easiest ways to implement this kind of complementary color scheme, and you can tell it looks fun. A lot of fun, actually. Now, this last point here, as important as it is to so many people, I really don't think there's a whole lot you can do about it. It's, of course, lighting and how it affects color. Now, I think lighting does play a massive role in how a color looks in your home. A color in this basement is going to look very different than something upstairs in one of my bedrooms. The reason for that is not only lighting, but also the flooring and the furniture around it. And lighting can come from various sources. You can have overhead lighting, you can have floor lamps, you can have accent lighting, and then of course you can have window light. And then you have to think about what position those winds are in relation to the sun. There's so much to think about, but at the end of the day, I don't know how important it is for you to worry about other than just testing your colors out. Because in this example here, the author is telling us, hey, if you have a north exposure room, stay away from greens and grays. But what if you love green? I mean, no one loves gray these days, but you know what I mean. I wouldn't disqualify any particular color because of the exposure of your room. I would narrow down the colors that you really enjoy and then just bring them home and test them out. See them on your wall throughout the day over multiple days, ideally with different varying weather conditions, so you get the full experience of that color before you commit to it. Because maybe that green that this designer said is a no-no actually looks really good in your room, even if it is a northern exposure. You never know until you try. If you've made it this far, you clearly love the channel, right? So why not subscribe and hit that like button? And if you want to support us even more, you can press that join button and become a channel member today. Support our full-time YouTube journey because we honestly do rely on you guys to keep this thing going. So really appreciate it. Here's another video recommended for you. Yeah, YouTube, so smart.